Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. The workshop buzzed faintly with the rhythmic hum of Izuku's tools as he stood before the skeletal frame of his latest experiment, the portal. This was the third iteration, each more refined than the last. His hands moved with surgical precision, securing each component with mathematical exactness, as his eyes sharp, calculating assessed every piece of the puzzle that was slowly taking form. The workshop was a blend of organized chaos, with blueprints pinned to the walls and diagrams of frequency harmonization and spatial resonance theories covering every available surface. There was no room for distraction here. Each failure, each adjustment, was a necessary step toward the perfect design. Piece by piece, the portal took shape. Every bolt was tightened to perfection, every wire connected with a precision only Izuku could achieve. The process was methodical, mechanical, and devoid of hesitation. Hours bled into each other unnoticed as the device gradually neared completion. When the final bolt was secured, Izuku stepped back and surveyed the structure. It was a towering frame, lined with harmonic emitters and a gleaming containment field generator. His sharp gaze lingered for a moment, inspecting the mechanics. There was no pride in his observation, only cold calculation. Turning to the control panel, he tapped a few buttons, feeding power into the portal's systems. A faint hum echoed through the workshop as the first surge of energy passed through. But nothing happened. Izuku's fingers hovered over the controls, his mind already anticipating the failure. The emitters flickered weakly, barely responding to the influx of energy. Then, without warning, a surge of sparks erupted from the base of the portal. Metal twisted with a violent crack, followed by the acrid smell of burnt components. The explosion sent debris flying, but Izuku's movements were precise. Instinctive, his energy shield flaring to life around him just in time to deflect the worst of the blast. When the chaos subsided, the workshop fell into a heavy silence. Izuku deactivated his shield, calmly approaching the wreckage of the portal. His gaze was detached, methodical, as he crouched down and examined the twisted components. Picking up a fragment of metal, he scrutinized the edges, noting the areas of stress and damage. Insufficient stabilization, he murmured to himself, the words cold and clinical. Frequency misalignment in the secondary emitters. Straightening, Izuku's eyes scanned the workshop. The remains of the portal were scattered across the floor, but there was no hint of frustration. He merely gathered the debris, feeding it into the renewable matter device that hummed softly in the corner of the room. The machine absorbed the material, breaking it down and reconstructing it into usable resources. In minutes, the pieces were restored, deposited into a neat tray beside the device. Izuku wasted no time. He immediately returned to his workbench, jotting down notes as his mind moved forward, calculating the next steps. Rework the frequency calibration, he muttered, already shifting his focus. His pen moved quickly, adjusting equations and refining his designs. With no sense of time passing, he continued working. By noon, the portal's design had been reworked, the flaws identified, and the next course of action clear in his mind. Without acknowledging the clock or the fact that his body was beginning to feel the weight of exhaustion, Izuku packed his notes and left the workshop. The day's work had concluded, but it was only a small step in his greater goal. The next day, Izuku bypassed school entirely. His mind had already moved past the need for social interactions. School was a necessary inconvenience. He would attend just enough classes to avoid suspicion, and the rest of his time was spent within the confines of his workshop, relentlessly refining the portal. His body never acknowledged the passage of time. No hunger, no thirst, no fatigue. Only the pursuit of perfection mattered. Izuku spent countless hours refining his portal project. His understanding of quantum mechanics, spatial resonance, and harmonic frequencies expanded with each failure. When a test failed, he didn't react with frustration. Instead, he dissected the error, made adjustments, and moved forward with even more precision. Each misstep was data, a valuable lesson in the pursuit of perfection. He had no need for validation. His results, no matter how small, were enough. Results were the only truth. and the portal was his singular truth. Every time the portal fizzled out or destabilized, Izuku meticulously rebuilt it, reworking the emitter frequencies, recalculating energy output, and adjusting the containment field. He explored new materials, experimented with different power sources, and even constructed new tools to measure energy fluctuations with unparalleled accuracy. His knowledge grew exponentially, as did his obsession with creating the perfect portal. As the months passed, the outside world began to fade even further into the background. He had long stopped keeping track of the calendar, and family events felt like meaningless interruptions in his quest. He didn't need to be acknowledged, nor did he care. It wasn't that he hated his family. They simply did not matter in the equation of his goals. His interactions with them had become automatic. Mechanical, he existed beside them, but never within the same world. It was during one of these long stretches of isolation that his routine was disrupted, a rare family gathering, an event that seemed inconsequential in the grand scheme of his work. Izuku was on his way to the workshop, the steady rhythm of his footsteps marking the start of another day filled with experimentation. The sun had barely risen, and the cool morning air hung around him as he made his way across the beach. His thoughts were already absorbed in the calculations for his next portal iteration. Suddenly, his mother's voice called from behind him, pulling him from his thoughts. "Izuku, it's your sister's birthday today. Could you help out?" she asked, her tone casual and almost distant, as if it were an afterthought. Her words felt as hollow as the smiles that accompanied them. Izuku didn't react immediately. Her voice seemed distant, muffled, as if it belonged to a world he had long since left behind. He paused for a brief moment, processing the request with mechanical precision before responding. "Of course," he replied, his voice steady and neutral. It wasn't that he wanted to be involved. It was simply another task to be performed with the same precision he applied to his work. A necessary part of the routine. The preparation for the birthday party unfolded before him, but it was all mechanical, hanging decorations, arranging gifts, and setting the table. He had no emotional connection to the event. To him, the task was no different from calculating the next step in his portal project, except it was wrapped in the superficial layers of family celebration. His hands moved methodically, but his mind remained fixed on the equations he would refine once this charade was over. Once he had fulfilled his obligations, he retreated to his workshop. The laughter and voices of his family faded into the background as he shut the door behind him. By evening, Izuku returned to the workshop. The portal's latest iteration was nearing completion. He fit the final piece into place, his movements deliberate, every component aligned with meticulous precision. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the workshop. The hum of the machines filled the silence as Izuku finalized the last adjustments. When the final step was complete, he activated the portal. At first, nothing happened. The silence in the workshop was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the containment field generator. Izuku's eyes remained fixed on the device, his mind already calculating potential errors. But before he could make another adjustment, the portal flickered to life. A faint glow began to emanate from the frame, and the hum grew louder. The vortex materialized within the ring, its edges shimmering with energy. Izuku narrowed his eyes, studying the phenomenon with the detachment of a scientist observing a test subject. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vortex collapsed, and the portal powered down with a low, sorrowful whine. Insufficient power output, Izuku noted aloud, already jotting down observations in his notebook. His mind processed the failure without hesitation. There was no sense of frustration, only curiosity about the root cause. A minor energy imbalance, easily rectified. Late that night, Izuku stood outside a nearby power plant, the cool air sharp against his skin. He had calculated the exact energy requirements for the portal, and it was clear that the power plant's output would suffice. With precision, he tapped into the plant's grid, creating a makeshift conduit to feed the necessary power into his workshop. The process was meticulous, requiring him to mask the surge in energy to avoid tripping alarms. The lights flickered briefly, a faint ripple in the city's electrical grid, but Izuku adjusted the flow with swift, calculated movements. Returning to the workshop, he connected the portal to the plant's grid. The city's lights flickered before plunging into darkness. Inside the workshop, the portal roared to life. The vortex stabilized, its edges glowing steadily with an otherworldly light. Izuku observed it for several moments, confirming its stability. Satisfied, he disconnected the conduit, ensuring no evidence remained. By the time the city's power returned to normal, Izuku had already dismantled his setup, leaving only the fully functional portal as a silent witness to his work. The portal shimmered, its edges crackling with volatile energy that rippled like liquid light. Izuku stood motionless before it, his fingers grazing the smooth, cold surface of the device. His mind calculated anticipation warred with a gnawing uncertainty. The steady hum of the portal vibrated through the room, a constant reminder of the leap he was poised to take. This wasn't a mere step forward. It was a dive into the unknown, a decision that could irrevocably alter the fabric of his existence. Izuku tightened his grip on the controls, his breath steady but shallow. He replayed the countless scenarios he had envisioned, his mind racing to account for every variable. Yet, no amount of preparation could erase the simple truth. The unknown lay ahead, vast and indifferent. With a final, resolute breath, Izuku stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, he was swallowed by an abyss of nothingness. It struck him all at once, the oppressive silence, the absence of gravity, the sterile void that stripped away every familiar sensation. As the void enveloped him, Izuku's mind remained methodical. The absence of gravity, sound, and atmosphere registered as data points to be cataloged, not causes for alarm. His chest tightened, signaling the lack of oxygen, lungs burning as his instincts screamed for oxygen. The void was merciless, an unforgiving realm that allowed no room for hesitation. Retreat. Izuku's arm shot out, his fingers clawing for the portal's edge. The surface felt both solid and fluid, like cool mercury beneath his touch. His body drifted farther into the expanse, the pull of inertia working against him. Summoning every ounce of control, he grasped the edge and propelled himself backward. The instant his body passed through, the familiar embrace of gravity seized him. He staggered, inhaling deeply as air rushed back into his lungs, its sweetness a stark contrast to the sterile nothingness he had just escaped. Izuku collapsed to one knee, his mind already dissecting the experience. His thoughts raced to identify the flaws in his approach, the vulnerabilities that had left him exposed. The void was not a hindrance. It was an anomaly to be analyzed and overcome, its variables demanding resolution. The workshop buzzed with activity, a symphony of clicks, hums, and the occasional spark. Izuku stood at the center of the chaos, his green eyes narrowed in focused determination. The smell of metal and oil filled the air, mingling with the faint tang of burnt circuits. Around him, an array of tools and components lay scattered across the workbench, a meticulously organized chaos that mirrored the calculations running through his mind. Every movement was deliberate, each step of the process mapped out with precision. The framework of the suit began to take shape under his skilled hands. He started with the foundation, layers of insulating fabric designed to regulate temperature and withstand extreme conditions. Next came the airtight seals, each one meticulously tested to ensure absolute integrity. The suit had to be perfect. Failure was not an option. As the hours wore on, Izuku's focus never wavered. He moved with a mechanical efficiency, his hands assembling the specialized components required for survival in the void. Radiation shielding, oxygen recycling systems, enhanced durability, all painstakingly integrated into the suit's sleek design. Every piece was a testament to his ingenuity and determination. By the time the final piece clicked into place, the workshop was littered with discarded tools and scraps of material. Izuku stepped back, surveying his work with a critical eye. The suit stood before him, a masterpiece of engineering and survival. Its dark, streamlined exterior was both functional and imposing, the internal systems humming softly as he powered it on. Izuku adjusted the helmet, feeling the snug fit as it sealed around his head. The suit's systems came alive, the gentle hiss of oxygen cycling through its filters a reassuring sound. He flexed his gloved fingers, testing the range of motion. Satisfied, he turned his attention back to the portal, its shimmering surface beckoning him once more. This time, he was ready. Izuku stepped through the portal again, the edges of the vortex collapsing behind him in a brief shimmer of energy. His boots clicked against an unfamiliar surface as he emerged into the unknown. The suit's internal systems hummed faintly, regulating his oxygen supply and analyzing the atmosphere. The room he entered was vast, its metallic walls reflecting faint lines of pulsating light. These veins of energy ran in precise patterns across the surface, lending the space an alien, otherworldly feel. The air was sterile, unnaturally so, and the silence was overwhelming, broken only by the faint hum of unseen machinery. Izuku's green visor highlighted the details of the space as his mind processed them. Every observation was catalogued, every irregularity noted. His gloved hand brushed against the smooth, cold wall. Material composition unknown. Energy transfer patterns consistent, he muttered, his voice filtered through the comms in his helmet. He advanced methodically, his boots leaving faint impressions on the pristine floor. The corridors stretched out in unnerving symmetry, their geometry so perfect it bordered on unnatural. Along the way, his visor marked sections of damage, scorch marks, and stress fractures in an otherwise flawless structure. Localized damage. Evidence of external stress. Impact minimal on internal systems, he noted. After several minutes of walking through the eerily precise corridors, Izuku reached a set of massive double doors. They parted with a soft hiss, revealing a vast control room beyond. He stepped inside, immediately struck by the scale of the space. Consoles lined the walls, their surfaces covered in alien symbols and faintly glowing panels. Screens flickered weakly, casting intermittent light across the room. The hum of dormant machinery filled the air, its presence more felt than heard. It didn't take long for him to notice something off about the room. The cold, metallic surfaces, the perfectly symmetrical layout, everything screamed of a level of technology far beyond what he had ever encountered. But it wasn't until he reached a large, curved panel embedded in one of the walls that the full scope of his situation hit him. Through the transparent surface of the panel, he saw it, the vast, infinite expanse of space. Stars glittered like distant diamonds against the endless black, their cold light flickering across the surface of a massive, desolate landscape. Slowly, Izuku's gaze shifted, his visor scanning the stars, calculating, comparing. His mind quickly pieced the puzzle together. He wasn't on some unknown planet as he'd initially assumed. He was in space aboard some sort of colossal vessel, drifting among the stars. Izuku took a step back, his eyes still locked on the view outside. The room around him suddenly felt less like an isolated chamber and more like a small part of something much, much larger. The enormity of it all didn't affect him emotionally, but it sharpened his focus. The sense of place had shifted from unknown terrain to the realization that he was aboard a ship alone, adrift in the vastness of space. Turning away from the window, his visor automatically adjusted to scan the rest of the room. In the center stood a massive pillar, its surface engraved with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. The pillar stretched from floor to ceiling, and surrounding it were dormant panels, integrated into the ship's systems. The room was a control hub of sorts, or at least it had been. Izuku approached the pillar, his visor processing data at a rapid pace. The material was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and the energy readings fluctuated wildly, hinting at a technology far more advanced than anything from his world. It was clear that the pillar was central to the functioning of the ship or whatever this place had been. Central system. Function unknown. Purpose. Critical, he muttered, scanning the structure, calculating its significance. He stepped closer, his boots making faint echoes on the sterile floor. His visor analyzed the intricate patterns etched into the surface of the pillar, noting their shifting nature. The patterns seemed to react to his presence, subtly changing, almost as if the pillar itself were aware of him. Izuku's gloved hand hovered over a nearby panel, his fingers barely grazing its surface. When his fingers made contact, the pillar responded. A soft hum resonated through the room, and the symbols on its surface flared to life. They flowed like liquid fire, the patterns twisting and shifting with a purpose, lighting up in a cascade of brilliant hues. The air in the room vibrated as if the very atmosphere was reacting to the pillar's awakening. A deep rumble, like the groan of a slumbering titan, reverberated through the control room. But before the pillar could fully activate, a strange sensation washed over Izuku. His visor flickered, its sensors adjusting to an unseen force as the pillar's surface rippled. There was a moment of tension, a brief silence as the energy in the room seemed to hold its breath. The pillar, sensing an alien presence, initiated a scan. Izuku felt a strange pressure in his mind, a quiet hum of unfamiliar data being processed. It was as if the pillar was examining him, analyzing his neural patterns, his physical presence. Then, the hum intensified, and Izuku's visor shifted, displaying a series of symbols that shifted in rapid sequence, too fast for him to comprehend. "It's adapting to me," he realized immediately, his thoughts racing. The pillar was altering its communication protocol. The strange symbols on its surface began to change, now reforming into something more familiar shapes, words, and phrases he could understand. His visor flickered again, and the alien language was replaced by a string of intelligible characters in his native tongue. The translation was seamless, the language adapting perfectly to his understanding. Then, from the heart of the pillar, a hologram began to take shape. It was humanoid, yet distinctly alien, with sharp, angular features that flickered and warped in the dim light. The hologram's voice was calm but carried a heavy sorrow, its words resonating with an almost palpable weight. "Welcome, traveler," it began, its tone calm but steeped in sorrow. Or, watcher, as you may be called. If you are seeing this message, then you have found the custodian of knowledge, the last of our kind to remain here. The last, perhaps, to witness what we once were. Izuku's visor flickered slightly as he processed the words, cataloging the information with dispassionate precision. The being before him was addressing him directly, watcher. He knew this was no accident, but an inevitability. The message was for him. The hologram's voice shifted, darker now, carrying the weight of ancient regret. "We were once masters of the universe, beings of unimaginable power. A Type 7 civilization, capable of reshaping reality itself. We created life, transcended death, and controlled the forces of time and space. But our power, our ambition, led us to destruction." Izuku's mind began to piece things together, silently processing the tragedy before him. The hologram paused for a moment, as if gathering the strength to continue. "We were not the only ones in this galaxy. There were those more powerful civilizations beyond us. Type 10, Type 12. We believed we could defy the natural order, that we could control everything. But we were wrong." The figure's form flickered again, the instability of the projection growing more pronounced. Its voice was tinged with bitterness, as though recounting a painful truth. The war began with internal conflict, a struggle for dominance. It spiraled beyond control, drawing the attention of civilizations far beyond our reach. And when they came, we were helpless. We fought with everything we had, but our greatest weapon turned out to be our own undoing. We tore apart time, we erased stars, and we played at being gods. But we were nothing more than fragile beings, standing before forces we could not comprehend. The hologram's account unfolded, a litany of hubris and destruction. Izuku processed the data with clinical efficiency, cataloging their errors as a warning rather than a tragedy. The hologram's voice grew even quieter, almost a whisper, as if speaking from the edge of oblivion. "The war destroyed everything. Our home planet, reduced to ash. All our colonies, eradicated. Every living being of our species, wiped out. We were forced to flee as our world collapsed. Ships overloaded with survivors, fighting for the last remaining resources. Some died trying to escape the war-torn planet. Others perished in the chaos of the Exodus. The few of us who are left now are the last to carry the legacy of what we were, the only ones who managed to flee, those who were fortunate enough to be here." Izuku's gloved hand brushed the wall as he processed this. Their escape was not a moment of triumph, but a desperate, frenzied flight for survival. The ship, their final refuge, was never meant to be a sanctuary. It was simply the last place where the remnants of a destroyed civilization had clung to life. "We are the survivors of a lost war," the hologram intoned, "but there is no victory in survival. We escaped, but we have no home to return to, no civilization to rebuild. All that remains is this ship, adrift in the vast emptiness, carrying the last of us." Izuku's eyes narrowed as the hologram's form flickered once more, struggling to stay intact. This ship is a tomb. We had hoped to preserve our knowledge, to ensure that at least something of our legacy would survive. But now, there is nothing left but regret. The last of our species will die here, aboard this ship, lost in the void. The figure faltered, as if gathering its last breath. The knowledge, all that we were, all that we discovered, it is yours now. We leave it to you, Watcher. Take it. Use it. But know this. We were the masters of our own destruction. We believed ourselves above the laws of the universe, and we paid the price. Do not follow in our footsteps. If you do, you will face the same end. Izuku stood still. He had absorbed the entire history of their downfall, their hubris, the war, the destruction of their planet, and the last remnants of their species trapped aboard this ship. The compartment in the pillar slid open with a soft hiss, and a disc emerged, glowing faintly in the dim light of the control room. Izuku's hand moved, reaching for it, his fingers closing around the relic without hesitation. The acquisition of knowledge was the only outcome of value. The disc pulsed faintly in his hand, a repository of potential, awaiting analysis and application. The remnants of a once great civilization now belonged to him. The portal's shimmering energy dissipated behind Izuku as he stepped into the stillness of his workshop. The soft hum of the machines greeted him, but it felt distant, as though the world itself was holding its breath. His movements were fluid, almost mechanical, as he unlocked the helmet of his makeshift space suit. The faint hiss of depressurization broke the silence, and the helmet came off, revealing a sheen of sweat on his focused face. He placed the helmet gently on the workbench, the smooth surface catching the soft light from above. Piece by piece, the suit came off, the components falling to the floor with a muted clatter, their purpose fulfilled. The cool air of the workshop contrasted sharply with the suffocating atmosphere of the void he had just left behind, but his mind was already moving past it. He gathered the discarded parts into a neat pile and tossed them into the renewable matter device. A soft hum and a flicker of light signaled the suit's assimilation, its materials broken down for future use. Izuku's gaze drifted to the small, glowing disc in his hand. He could feel its pulse, the energy of the artifact still vibrating faintly, almost like it was waiting for something. A mission, a purpose. His thumb brushed the surface, and the faint glow reflected off his glasses, casting a soft light across his face. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 3:12 a.m. A tired exhale escaped his lips, but his focus never faltered. Fatigue had little place in a mind always calculating, always analyzing. The task ahead of him was clear. This disc had to be understood, analyzed, slowly, carefully, with precision. His hand moved with practiced efficiency, securing the disc inside a compartment in his bag before slinging it over his shoulder. He paused for a moment, taking one last look around the room. It was a familiar sight, the cluttered workbench, the scattered tools, the piles of materials half-finished. The world around him always felt in motion, like there was something to fix, something to improve. But for now, everything was at rest. The streets outside were quiet, the cool night air against his skin as he walked home. His boots echoed softly, a rhythmic sound that mirrored the calm in his chest. The world outside seemed distant, muted. His mind was already working through the possibilities, processing the new data, wondering what this discovery would lead to. But there was no urgency, just a task to be done. By the time he reached his house, it felt like the silence had followed him. The front door creaked open, and he stepped inside, greeted by the messy living room. Streamers clung to the ceiling, and discarded cups and plates were scattered across every surface. A sugary smell lingered in the air, remnants of Himari's party. Upstairs, Izuku's room was as he left it, quiet, still, untouched. He set his bag down on the desk with a soft thud, feeling the weight of the disc inside. But even that was a distant thought. His mind was already elsewhere. With a quiet exhale, Izuku turned toward the bed. His body sank into the mattress, the familiar creak of the springs barely registering. The chaos of the day, of the discoveries, the risks, the alien technology fell away as his breathing steadied. His mind had done enough for the day. The rest could wait. In seconds, he was asleep, the world around him growing quiet as his body finally let go. The faint light of morning filtered through Izuku's blinds, gradually pulling him from sleep. His emerald eyes blinked open, sharp and focused despite the fatigue that still clung to his body. Without a moment's hesitation, he swung his legs off the bed and stood, his movements deliberate as he made his way to the bathroom. The cool tiles of the bathroom greeted him as he stepped inside. He ran water over his hands, feeling the sting of cold against his skin before adjusting the shower's temperature. The warm spray of water soon followed, washing away the residue of yesterday's effort. The shower, though brief, was a necessary routine. Clean, composed, prepared. Dressed in his usual attire, black hoodie and dark jeans, Izuku left the bathroom with a quiet purpose. His footsteps were soft on the floorboards as he walked down the hall, each stride measured and efficient. He passed the staircase, a fleeting glance toward the empty kitchen confirming what he already knew. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The plates from last night's party remained stacked haphazardly on the counter, evidence of the noisy gathering he had scarcely attended. Izuku noted the indentation on the dining table, where an envelope had likely rested. A shopping list or itinerary. His family had left early, no doubt for Himari's errands. They always did, prioritizing her over everything else. Izuku didn't need a note to understand. Opening the fridge, he surveyed the sparse contents. A few leftover containers, shoved carelessly aside. The absence of any fresh food told him everything he needed to know. There was nothing for him here. Izuku selected a sandwich and a half-empty bottle of water and ate in silence, the simple act of nourishment barely registering in his mind. Once finished, he discarded the packaging, washed his hands, and left the house. The door clicked softly behind him. His destination? The workshop. The door to the workshop slid shut with a faint hiss, and the low hum of machinery filled the air, a familiar sound, one that signaled the start of another task. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of overhead lights, casting long shadows across the cluttered workbench. Tools, components, and half-finished projects lay scattered, but today there was only one focus: the disc. Izuku placed the small, glowing disc on the workbench, its surface pulsing gently with a faint light. It was an unassuming object, but its significance was boundless. It was the culmination of a journey that had started when he first stepped through the portal into the remnants of the Type 7 civilization. The knowledge contained within it wasn't just advanced, it was unimaginable. This was not the kind of technology that could be measured by conventional standards. It was a glimpse into a reality where physics and the natural laws had been bent and restructured. Izuku's fingers grazed the surface of the disc, and the moment his hand made contact with the disc, the room around him shifted imperceptibly. A low hum vibrated through the air, and the very atmosphere seemed to ripple. A soft glow began to spread outward, casting an ethereal light that filled the space. The disc responded to his presence, and before him, 7 spheres materialized in the air. They hovered in perfect alignment, each one glowing with a different hue, pulsing rhythmically, their energies both alien and familiar. Each sphere represented a level of knowledge from the civilizations across the cosmos, a journey through space and time, knowledge waiting to be unlocked. The first sphere, a muted gray, caught his attention immediately. It felt as if it was calling to him not with words, but with an undeniable, silent pull. Izuku didn't hesitate. His fingers brushed against its surface, and the moment he activated it, the sphere expanded rapidly, unfolding like a flower in full bloom. The hologram before him transformed into a dynamic 3D lattice of energy, equations, systems, and abstract concepts, each part rearranging itself into an intricate, evolving structure. The other 6 spheres remained suspended in the background, their presence barely noticeable as the gray sphere took center stage. It pulsed softly, its glow steadily intensifying as it began to reveal the vast store of knowledge of Type 0 civilization. As Izuku focused, the hologram did not remain static. It shifted, interacted, and adapted, revealing systems of incredible complexity, energy conversions, quantum flows, and the fundamental building blocks of the universe, all accessible with a simple movement of his hand. For Izuku, the core concepts of Type 0 civilization were familiar. Thermodynamics, energy flow, atomic interactions, these were foundational subjects he had already explored through his own work. Yet what was once a trivial subject now unfolded with an unexpected depth. This wasn't just information, it was a sensory experience, a multidimensional map of reality itself. He zoomed in with a swipe of his fingers, and the hologram responded, magnifying the scene before him. Atoms collided, releasing energy in real time, their paths visible as they ricocheted off one another. Electrons moved in calculated orbits around atomic nuclei. The movement of particles, the transfer of energy, everything was laid bare before him. This wasn't just theory. This was the very fabric of the universe unfolding in front of him, layer by layer. With every touch, new dimensions of understanding opened. He watched as the molecules in the system reacted with near-perfect precision. Each atomic collision was captured in exquisite detail, and he could see the subtle shifts in energy as each molecule vibrated and interacted. It was an interconnected web, everything working in perfect harmony, and the complexity of it all, though immense, did not overwhelm him. In fact, it felt intuitive, like a puzzle whose pieces were falling into place the moment he looked at them. Izuku's fingers danced across the air, manipulating the hologram as he honed in on specific areas of interest. The display shifted, showing a complex energy converter, an efficient system for capturing and transforming energy without loss. As the hologram unfolded, the layers of the converter expanded, revealing how it captured temporal energy fields and used them to stabilize power flow. Izuku's mind raced as he watched the system in action. He had already tinkered with energy conversion, but this was an entirely new approach, a method of energy harnessing that eliminated inefficiencies. He reached deeper into the design, tracing the interactions of quantum particles with a focused eye. The hologram revealed how energy could be captured, stored, and redistributed without the usual losses inherent in most systems. Each component of the energy converter was intricately designed, every piece worked in perfect synchrony. Izuku could even see the quantum interactions that allowed the device to exist in a state of perpetual equilibrium. It was a marvel of engineering, and yet it was only the beginning. But Izuku wasn't content just observing. As the design revealed itself, his mind immediately began to process and iterate. This system wasn't just a model. It was a starting point, a base for improvements. He could see ways to make it more efficient, more compact. In a matter of moments, his fingers were already manipulating the design. The hologram bent to his will, shifting and rearranging as he made adjustments. He isolated parts of the system, refining the energy pathways, recalibrating the temporal stabilizers. Stabilizing energy flow, he muttered under his breath as he mentally noted the changes. He scribbled down ideas in his notebook. Optimize energy transfer using nanomaterial conductors. Use superconductive coils for zero-loss energy conduction. Minimize the heat dissipation with advanced quantum coatings. Yet even as he explored, a deeper sense of possibility stirred within him. This converter, while extraordinary, was still a static solution to a dynamic problem. What fascinated him more was what lay beneath the surface of the hologram. How energy could be manipulated on a quantum scale, how space-time itself could be bent to make energy flow in more efficient patterns. As if responding to his thoughts, the hologram shifted once again. This time, it displayed something even more ambitious, a model of space-time manipulation and the creation of portals. Izuku had built his own rudimentary portals before, crude by comparison, but this was something else entirely. The system displayed a refined version of his own concept, with energy fields bending and warping, allowing passage between different points in space. But this was no simple doorway, it was a sophisticated system, one that harnessed the fundamental properties of the universe to create stable and reliable portals. The intricate schematics unfolded before him, revealing the complex processes that made this possible. Izuku's mind absorbed the details with lightning speed. The portal's energy flow was stabilized using precise quantum field manipulations, directing energy into a singularity that bent space and time. The hologram displayed how dimensional calibrations were continuously adjusted, how energy was redistributed to prevent collapse. Every interaction, every minute detail, was laid out before him in perfect clarity. This was beyond what he had imagined. This wasn't just about creating portals, it was about mastering space-time itself. Izuku zoomed in on specific areas of the design, watching the flow of energy as it rippled through the system. The complexity was staggering. He saw how the system adjusted the portal's entry and exit points in real time, how the energy needed to stabilize the passage was modulated by quantum particles. This wasn't just a way of opening doors, it was an entire infrastructure, an interdimensional transport network that connected the far reaches of space and time. He traced the paths where energy converged, studying the intricate mathematical equations that governed these interactions. Izuku's mind spun with possibilities. This technology wasn't just about creating portals for travel, it could be used to establish connections across vast distances, to build an infrastructure that spanned galaxies. It could be used to transport materials, people, and knowledge between planets, across systems, across universes. The idea of portals becoming the foundation for a universal network was exhilarating. He focused on a set of equations detailing quantum entanglement and dimensional resonance. These were concepts he had only barely touched upon before. But as he zoomed in, the equations adapted to his understanding. They clicked into place. Izuku scribbled in his notebook with a focus that could only come from complete mastery. Quantum entanglement for multi-point travel, dimensional resonance for portal stability, optimizing energy pathways for interdimensional use. He didn't flinch in the face of this overwhelming knowledge. This wasn't a barrier, it was a challenge. A puzzle waiting to be solved. And for Izuku, challenges were not obstacles. They were opportunities to build, create, and innovate. The portal system continued to evolve before him, its design expanding in scope. But Izuku knew that he had reached a point where he could take the next step. The knowledge he had gained was vast, but it was also practical. It was a foundation he could build on, refine, and perfect. With a final swipe, he dismissed the hologram, letting the model fade into the ether. His mind was already shifting focus, already anticipating the next sphere, the Type 1 civilization. Mastery over planetary systems awaited, and Izuku was ready. Time skipped 2 years. The vastness of space stretched endlessly, an inky void punctuated by distant stars, swirling galaxies, and nebulae that glowed with faint, ethereal light. The cold silence of the cosmos was broken only by the faint hum of unseen forces, the constant, imperceptible dance of gravity, the ebb and flow of interstellar energy, and the slow, inexorable drift of forgotten relics lost to the passage of time. In this seemingly empty expanse, the remnants of ancient civilizations floated in disarray, their once great creations now mere shadows of their former selves, scattered across the void. Amidst the debris of these long-lost worlds, a ship hovered in the depths of space, its sleek surface scarred by time and the wear of 1,000 years. Once a majestic vessel, a symbol of advanced engineering and technological prowess, it now stood still, waiting in silence. It was a ship beyond the capabilities of its creators, a vessel whose secrets had long been forgotten, its story lost in the annals of history. Alone and abandoned, it had drifted through the ages, untouched and undisturbed. The ship had been here for longer than anyone could remember. Time had stretched far beyond the limits of human comprehension. But now, something had changed. The ship was no longer a passive observer in the vast emptiness. It was awakening. The soft, almost imperceptible hum of nanobots filled the space around the vessel, their activity invisible to the naked eye. These microscopic workers moved in unison, tirelessly repairing, rebuilding, and refining the ship with an efficiency far beyond any human creation. The dark matter collected by the lone figure who stood in the center of the ship's hull had been transformed into a catalyst for the ship's restoration. The nanobots, now powered by this energy, worked with precision, guided by a blueprint that was ever-evolving as they brought the ship closer to its intended form. Inside the ship, the work neared completion. Izuku's gloved hands moved with practiced precision as he carefully inserted the final nanotech component into the ship's intricate control system. Each movement was deliberate, honed through countless hours of study and practice. The ship's surface shimmered slightly as the nanobots automatically affixed themselves, sealing the component into place. The intricate web of repairs was now complete. Izuku stepped back, observing the vessel before him. The ship's dormant systems hummed to life, their awakening a slow and deliberate process. The long slumber was over. Lights flickered on throughout the hull, casting long, shifting shadows across the expansive interior. The ship was vastly larger, now 10 times its original size, a stunning fusion of sleek, advanced design and highly functional engineering. The scale of the transformation was breathtaking, and yet, Izuku's gaze remained fixed, unblinking, taking in the complex systems and infrastructure that now filled the ship's interior. With a final check of the oxygen levels and the ship's atmosphere, Izuku removed his spacesuit. The cooling system hissed softly as it powered down, and the suit's internal systems began to shut off. The air inside the ship was crisp and clean, just as he had anticipated. It was breathable, devoid of the sterile, artificial smell that filled most space vessels. He moved past the ship's newly upgraded control center, the hum of the internal systems guiding his steps, the pulse of the ship's rejuvenated power source resonating throughout the space. The ship was now fully operational. Izuku moved toward the lab, a vast room filled with the clutter of unfinished projects, some of them still in various stages of development, others already complete, but yet to reach their full potential. It was a place where raw ideas were given form, where concepts were born and then shaped into reality. And yet, in this environment, perfection had not yet been achieved. There was always more to do, more to understand. Among the various inventions scattered across the lab stood two of Izuku's most ambitious creations completed months earlier, but still foundational to the progress he had made. The first was the zero-point energy generator, a compact but incredibly powerful device capable of harnessing the limitless energy of the vacuum of space. The core of the generator hummed softly, vibrating with the immense energy it drew from the emptiness around it. By tapping directly into the zero-point field, the quantum energy that exists even in the deepest vacuum, it produced virtually limitless power, drawing no fuel from the outside world. Beside the energy generator stood the zero-point fabricator, dormant and waiting for activation. Equally powerful, the fabricator was capable of creating both matter and energy from nothing by manipulating quantum fluctuations. With it, raw energy could be converted into solid matter at will. Simple tools, complex structures, and even entire systems could be created instantaneously. Izuku had developed both of these devices months ago, at a time when his understanding of Type 7 technology was still in its early stages. He had unlocked the critical knowledge that allowed him to build these creations, but he had not yet fully mastered the intricacies of the advanced technology. The knowledge was there, but the application required much more time and study. He was still learning, refining his understanding, and discovering new aspects of the technology with each experiment. It was through this ongoing process of trial and error that he was able to use the near-infinite energy produced by the zero-point energy generator to power the nanobots that restructured the ship. This energy fueled the nanobots' efforts, allowing them to perform complex repairs and upgrades. The generator's power enabled the ship's growth, its transformation from a once-abandoned vessel to something far greater. The ship had expanded tenfold in size, and as it did, its internal systems grew more sophisticated, adapting to the increasing scale of the vessel. Amid the scattered experiments and devices filling the lab, Izuku's gaze settled on a small pedestal near the far wall. Resting on it was a test tube filled with a dark, liquid-like substance that appeared almost alive. The black fluid swirled slowly, faint ripples spreading across its surface as though reacting to his presence. Tiny, almost imperceptible flecks of light shimmered within the liquid, resembling stars suspended in a miniature cosmos. This was one of his most daring creations, the biomorphs. Izuku approached the pedestal. The test tube was contained within a translucent shell of reinforced alloy, designed to isolate and protect its volatile contents. With a swift swipe of his hand, he deactivated the field, allowing the pedestal's interface to open. The faint hum of the containment system faded as he retrieved the test tube and held it up to examine its contents. The biomorphs represented a turning point in his research. They were the culmination of his studies into Type 5 technology, a blend of dark matter, energy, and nanotechnology. These nanobots, or biomorphs, were designed to integrate seamlessly with organic life, enhancing and evolving it in ways that traditional augmentation could never achieve. Izuku had first discovered references to such constructs in the archives of a Type 5 civilization. Their capabilities were described in tantalizing fragments. Yet as those civilizations advanced to Type 6 and beyond, the biomorphs were conspicuously absent. Whether they were abandoned or deemed obsolete remained unclear, but their potential had drawn his attention. They stopped working on it. Even with its potential, Izuku murmured. He placed the test tube on a nearby workstation, his tone neutral. They couldn't have reached its full capabilities. The biomorphs he had created were far beyond the original designs. Powered by the zero-point energy generator and fabricator, he had refined their structure at the molecular level. These new biomorphs weren't merely tools, they were symbiotic, capable of merging with organic life to enhance its physiology on an unprecedented scale. They could restructure cells, rewrite DNA, and adapt their host's body to any environment, all while drawing energy from the boundless reserves of dark matter itself. Izuku prepared the injector with precision, his focus unwavering. For months, he had studied the biomorphs in isolation, simulating their integration into organic systems, analyzing their behavior under countless conditions. But now, it was time to move beyond theory. True understanding required direct experience. He rolled up his sleeve and applied the injector to his forearm. There was no hesitation, his actions were deliberate and measured. He had accounted for every variable. With a sharp hiss, the biomorphs surged into his veins. The effect was immediate. A cold, electrifying sensation spread from the injection site, coursing through his body like a tidal wave. Muscles tensed, vision blurred, and a searing heat ignited deep within his core. Pain followed a sharp, all-encompassing ache as the biomorphs began their work. Izuku staggered, gripping the edge of the workstation as his body underwent its transformation. His cells burned with energy, his bones ached as though being reforged, and his DNA unraveled and rewove itself in a process that was both agonizing and methodical. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath as his vision flickered. His veins pulsed with an eerie black glow, the biomorph's presence visible beneath his skin. Yet, even through the pain, a growing sense of power emerged, a hum that resonated through his being. Minutes passed before the pain began to subside. Izuku steadied himself, the faint hum of the biomorphs reverberating through his body. The sensation was immediate and intense, something foreign yet undeniably present. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing inward. His senses were the first to register the transformation. His olfactory perception was the first to sharpen. He inhaled deeply, and the world around him flooded with a myriad of scent chemicals from the lab, the faint musk of the room's air, the trace of sweat on his own skin. Every scent was crisp, defined, and overwhelming in its clarity. The minute details of his environment became as apparent as though they were in front of his eyes. He opened his eyes, and the change in his vision was almost blinding in its clarity. He could see every detail of the room with perfect precision, even the smallest dust particles hanging in the air. The room's lights seemed brighter, sharper, and every shadow was cut cleanly. He could see the veins running through his hands, the faintest movements in the farthest corners of the room. His hearing shifted next. The room, which had been silent before, was now alive with noise, distant mechanical whirring, the rhythmic beat of his own pulse, the soft hum of the ventilation system, even the faintest movements outside the room. Every sound was distinct, every vibration clear. Senses, acute. Olfactory, auditory, and visual perception heightened. Tactile sensitivity, elevated beyond baseline. Izuku murmured, his voice flat and precise, his mind cataloging the new information without a hint of surprise. He opened his eyes fully, returning his attention to the physical test. Now, his enhanced senses pushed aside, he turned his focus inward, evaluating his muscles and strength. He raised his hands, examining them with a cold, methodical focus. His fingers flexed as he tested the fine motor controls, smooth and effortless. Every movement felt precise, deliberate. He moved his arms, rolling his shoulders and twisting his torso, carefully evaluating each joint. There was no resistance, no stiffness, only fluidity. He crouched low and then sprung upward. His legs propelled him with startling force, lifting him several feet into the air. He landed with perfect balance, every muscle engaged and responsive. The power he felt was beyond anything his previous body had known. Joint integrity, stable. Muscle responsiveness, heightened. Reflexes, Instantaneous, he noted, observing his own movements with clinical detachment. He approached a reinforced metal panel mounted on the wall, a remnant of an old experiment. With deliberate focus, he curled his fingers into a fist. He struck the panel with calculated force. The impact was immediate. There was a sharp, resounding clang as the metal buckled inward, cracks radiating outward. Izuku stared at his hand. The panel, designed to withstand extreme pressure, had crumpled as though it were paper. Strength, significantly enhanced. Impact force, at least 5 times baseline, possibly more, he concluded, his voice steady and analytical. He flexed his fist slowly, examining the results. There was no discomfort, no strain, just the raw power of his new form. Turning to a nearby workstation, Izuku activated a diagnostic system. The holographic interface flared to life, presenting a full suite of tests: agility, speed, endurance, precision, and cognitive capacity. He selected the full suite of assessments, ready to measure every facet of his transformation. Let's determine the full extent of these capabilities, he stated, his thoughts driven purely by the need for data. For as long as I could remember, Izuku had been nothing. He existed in the background, a shadow in the corners of our house. Honestly, I couldn't even recall a time when he'd been anything more than that: silent, distant, practically invisible. It was almost as if he wasn't even trying. It made me wonder, though, if he even wanted to be noticed, or if he just accepted that he'd always be overshadowed by people who mattered. He was weak, quirkless, a relic of the past in a society where strength and power ruled everything. The idea of a hero without a quirk was laughable, and Izuku fit that mold perfectly. There was always this emptiness about him, like he didn't belong anywhere. He was there, but never really there, if you know what I mean. It was like he was this faint, annoying presence, something you couldn't quite get rid of, but you also didn't want to acknowledge. He was a non-entity, a side note, a footnote in the book of life. Me, on the other hand, I was different. I mattered. I always had. My power wasn't just a gift, it was a legacy. Light manipulation, something only a few could dream of. My parents made it clear from the start that I was going to be their pride, their success. They'd brag about me to anyone who'd listen, always pushing me to do more, be more. I was going to surpass their expectations, the world's expectations, and become something no one could ever ignore. There was pressure, sure, but it wasn't a burden, it was a privilege. I was meant for greatness. I was their shining star. Izuku? He was just irrelevant. He didn't even deserve a place in the picture. No one cared about him, and honestly, I wasn't sure why anyone ever had. What had he ever done to deserve anyone's attention? He was a ghost, a presence without substance. I was the one who got all the praise, all the admiration. I was the one who mattered. I didn't even think he cared, and that's what annoyed me most. He never looked at me with anything but that stupid, vacant stare, like he couldn't even be bothered. It was like he didn't even want to be seen. But then again, maybe that's why no one cared. He didn't care. Not about the attention I got, the praise, the love. He didn't want any of it. It was like he had his own little world where he didn't need any of that validation. It was infuriating, honestly. I'd kill to have the kind of indifference he had. But there was no way I could ever just not care like he did. He had all the space in the world to do whatever he wanted without a single expectation on him. And me? I had to carry the weight of everything, my family's expectations, the pressure to succeed. All eyes were on me, and there was Izuku, fading into the background. I couldn't even look at him without feeling some kind of disgust. How could someone live in the same world as everyone else and just not care? How could you be so indifferent? It wasn't even like he was trying to be different. It was like he had no desire to be anything. He didn't want to be part of anyone's life, especially not mine. But then, everything changed. I remember my entire body throbbing with pain, each breath feeling like shards of glass scraping through my chest. It's hard to say now if the haze that clouded my vision was smoke or the dizziness seeping in, but everything around me felt wrong. Colors, reds, blacks, and grays bled together, swirling and twisting in ways that didn't make sense. They melted, mixing in the air like forgotten paint left out in the rain, impossible to separate. The air was thick, heavy. It stung my lungs, thick with something acrid, like blood and smoke, choking me, suffocating me with each breath. I could hear screams in the distance, but they sounded muffled, distorted, like they didn't belong to this world. Or maybe they belonged to a world I couldn't reach. And through it all, that laugh. That man's laugh. It sliced through the fog, deep and cruel, the kind of laughter that came from someone who already knew they'd won. It grated on my mind, echoing around me, dragging me deeper into the madness. I tried to move, to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. It felt like it was made of stone, my arms and legs heavy, dragged down by invisible weights. My light manipulation had failed me, leaving me empty, helpless. My vision blurred, the edges of reality fraying and slipping away, my eyelids heavy with exhaustion. I fought to stay awake, but it felt like trying to hold on to something slippery, something that didn't exist. The darkness crept in, swallowing the world around me. Then, there was a shadow. A figure. I tried to focus, but my mind was swimming, too foggy to make sense of it. Someone was walking toward us, moving slowly, almost leisurely, as if none of this chaos even mattered. It didn't make sense, but I knew who it was. Izuku, I whispered, my voice cracked and barely audible, lost in the fog of my own mind that it was him. A jolt of panic shot through me, but it was distant, like I could feel it, but couldn't act on it. My heart sped up, but it felt like it was happening far away. What was he doing here? Why is he here? Get away. I managed to force the words out, but they felt weak, so weak. They didn't even sound like mine, and I wasn't sure if he heard them, or if he even could. Then, the darkness pulled me in, and I was lost to it. When I woke up, everything was wrong. The light above me was blinding, an unnatural brightness that felt like someone had turned the sun itself toward me. I squinted, my eyes fighting to adjust, but it didn't matter. Nothing felt right. The pain, that gnawing, constant pain, was gone, replaced by a strange, unsettling numbness. My body felt alien, as if I no longer had any control over it. It wasn't mine. The ground beneath me wasn't solid. It shifted with every subtle movement. The air around me was thick, suffocating, the wrong kind of wrong. It was as though reality itself had forgotten its rules. I could make out the faint silhouette of Izuku a few feet away, his figure still, almost distant. Above him, strange drones floated, their dark metallic bodies pulsing with an eerie, steady light. They drifted in slow, deliberate arcs, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to stretch and warp, as if they were stretching the fabric of time itself. The whole scene felt like a dream, too surreal to grasp, too bizarre to be real. What? My voice cracked, barely escaping my throat, a foreign sound that felt disconnected from me. It was hoarse, weak, almost as if I was hearing it from far away. My own thoughts seemed to slip through my fingers, too heavy to hold on to. Izuku didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge me at all, but the stillness in his posture, the calm, unfaltering way he stood, it was wrong. Too calm. As if he didn't feel the weight of the situation. As if nothing could touch him. And then I saw him. That man. Charging toward us, a massive blur of raw power and rage. His body was a storm, moving too fast for my mind to process. His face, twisted with a dark, almost animalistic snarl, was something I couldn't quite place: frustration, anger. His fist was pulled back, coiled and ready to strike, to shatter. Izuku, look out. The words ripped out of my throat, a raw scream of desperation. But even as I shouted, it felt like my voice wasn't real, like it was floating away from me, out of reach. Did Izuku even hear me? But he was already on us, his fist flying toward Izuku with terrifying speed. It was impossible to follow, too fast, too brutal. The force behind it rattled the air, distorting everything around it, like the world was bending under its power. The wind howled in its wake, sharp and stinging, as if the punch could tear everything apart. But then, it stopped. It just stopped. The world seemed to freeze in that moment. His fist hung suspended in the air, frozen inches from Izuku's face, as though an invisible wall had materialized out of nowhere. I watched in disbelief as the space between them seemed to warp, twisting like water disturbed by an unseen force. The very air shuddered, shimmering as if reality itself had buckled under the strain. The villain's fist trembled, frozen in place, like it couldn't move any farther, as though something far stronger than him was keeping it locked in the air. His face twisted, eyes narrowed, confusion clouding the rage that had been there moments ago. His muscles bulged, his body straining against the invisible resistance, but he couldn't break through. With a snarl, he tried again. His fist came forward with even more force, the air around it crackling with power. It was almost too fast to see, but once again, just before it could make contact, it stopped. The punch was arrested mid-swing, held back by the same invisible force. It hovered inches from Izuku's face, and the world seemed to hold its breath in that moment, frozen, suspended, caught in the impossible. The man gritted his teeth, a growl rumbling from deep in his chest. He swung again, this time with more desperation, more fury. Each punch was faster, more violent, the force of it shaking the ground beneath us. The air around him screamed with the effort, but each blow was stopped before it could even land. His fist slammed against the invisible wall again, and each time, the force of it felt like the very earth might crack open. But nothing connected. None of his punches reached Izuku. It was as if the very air itself was rejecting him, refusing to let his attacks touch their target. The punches grew more frantic, more savage, but no matter how much strength the villain poured into them, no matter how fast his fists flew, the invisible wall held firm. It was futile. All of his fury, his violence, his power, nothing could break through. The villain was locked out. I watched, rooted to the spot, my mind spinning as I tried to process what I was seeing. It felt wrong, all of it. The fight, the power, the invisible force, it was all slipping through my fingers, like I was trying to grasp smoke. A cold wave of disbelief washed over me, seeping into every part of me, pulling me further into confusion. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't make sense of any of it. What was happening? It had been an ordinary day at school, so ordinary, in fact, that it seemed as if time itself had conspired to pass by unnoticed. The lessons unfolded with their usual predictability, the hum of the classroom barely registering in Himari's mind as her teachers spoke their praises, words she had heard 1,000 times before. A smile, a nod, a reassuring pat on the back for a job well done, it was all part of the rhythm. She was accustomed to it, like the sound of the bell marking the end of each period or the way the air in the hallways always seemed to carry a faint scent of chalk dust and coffee. When the final bell rang, it was as though the world picked up its pace around her. The school emptied out in a rush of students, backpacks slung over shoulders, chatter filling the air. Himari, however, moved with a calm ease, as if she were somehow separate from it all. Her school bag rested lazily over her shoulder, and with each step, her thoughts drifted toward the small things, the kind of thoughts that usually didn't require any effort. She navigated through the crowds outside the school without really seeing them, her eyes lost in the rhythm of the familiar streets. The usual hum of the city surrounded her, cars honking, distant conversations, the occasional ring of a bicycle bell. Yet something felt off. As she walked, the feeling crept up on her, subtle at first. There was a stillness in the air, a quiet that seemed out of place. The streets, usually bustling with the after-school rush, now seemed unnervingly empty. She found herself walking at a slower pace, her steps echoing on the pavement in a way that made the world around her feel muffled. There was no chatter, no clatter of distant voices, no honking of impatient drivers. The distant sound of helicopter blades sliced through the silence like a knife, the rhythmic thrum growing louder with each passing second. At first, it was only a slight disturbance, just another noise in the background of a busy city, but it quickly became undeniable. Helicopters weren't a regular presence in this part of town, especially not at this hour. Himari's senses sharpened. Her mind, which had been wandering through the monotony of the day, snapped to attention. She couldn't pinpoint the direction at first, but the sound of the blades was unmistakable, drawing closer, louder. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. She quickened her pace, scanning the sky for the source, her thoughts racing. The sound seemed to be coming from above and beyond, somewhere not far from where she stood. Then, she saw them. A pair of helicopters, their dark silhouettes cutting through the overcast sky, flying in tight formation. The familiar hum of the engines vibrated in her chest as they headed in a specific direction, low and fast, cutting across the city with alarming urgency. Her eyes tracked them as they passed overhead. She could feel her heart quickening, an uneasy tension settling in her chest. They weren't just passing through, they were headed somewhere nearby. Without thinking, her legs carried her forward. She started walking faster, keeping her eyes on the helicopters, determined to follow. The distance wasn't far, she could make it if she hurried. As she moved, the sound of blades grew fainter, but the sense of unease in her gut only intensified. Something was happening, and she had to know what. She turned the corner, moving deeper into the city, when the thick, acrid scent of smoke hit her like a punch to the face. It was immediate, overwhelming. Her breath caught, and she paused, momentarily disoriented. The smell was unmistakable burning. Something was on fire, and it was close. Instinctively, she pressed forward, quickening her pace once more, determined to get closer to whatever the helicopters were responding to. Her stomach twisted as she approached the source of the smoke. The city, which moments ago had felt so normal, now seemed foreign, almost unreal. And then, she rounded another corner, and everything changed. Shattered windows lay scattered across the street like jagged, dangerous confetti, glinting under the dim, flickering streetlights. The once pristine pavement was now littered with debris, torn pieces of metal, brick chunks, and the remnants of vehicles crushed beyond recognition. The air was thick with smoke, a hazy, choking fog that clung to everything, coating the remnants of the city like a shroud. The flames from the wreckage licked hungrily at the sky, casting a grotesque, flickering glow across the scene, distorting the shadows into something monstrous. The street, which should have been bustling with the usual after-school energy, was now a battlefield unrecognizable, warped beyond belief. The faintest sound of crackling flames and distant sirens were the only things that filled the silence, except for the occasional groan of a collapsing building or a distant crash of debris falling from the remnants of the shattered city. And among the wreckage, the water hose heroes lay motionless. Himari's breath caught in her throat as her eyes fell upon their fallen forms. The heroes who had always been larger-than-life figures to her beacons of strength and safety were now broken, twisted bodies, strewn across the destruction they'd once fought to protect. Splash was the first one she saw. Her vibrant blue suit was torn to shreds, stained dark red in places, her body twisted at an odd angle. Blood pooled around her, mingling with the dirt and ash that had begun to coat the ground. Himari's heart skipped a beat, and her stomach turned. Her gaze darted to Jetstream, his once pristine suit now battered, torn, and stained with blood. He was crumpled in the wreckage, his limbs splayed in unnatural positions, his chest barely rising with the effort of each ragged breath. His usually confident and unshakable demeanor was now gone, replaced by the vulnerability of a hero who had fought to the very end. The sight of them, once symbols of hope and power, now reduced to this grim reality, shattered Himari's mind. Her hands trembled as she took a step forward, but it felt as though the ground beneath her was made of stone. What happened? Who did this? The questions echoed in her mind, but there were no answers, only the horrific sight of their fallen forms. And then, as if the nightmare could not become any worse, the source of the devastation revealed itself. From the heart of the destruction, a figure emerged, a hulking mass of violence and power. The villain was a monstrous presence, his massive frame towering over the wreckage like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. His wild, bloodshot eyes gleamed with a twisted sort of satisfaction, taking in the destruction he had wrought. His grin was wide, too wide, as if he reveled in the suffering, savoring the chaos in a way that made Himari's skin crawl. His clothes hung in tatters, barely clinging to his battered form, and his fists were slick with blood, likely the remnants of his previous victims. He was a beast of a man, radiating an oppressive, destructive energy that made the very air feel charged, as though an unseen storm was about to break. Himari's legs felt like lead, her instincts screaming at her to run, to flee as far and as fast as she could. But her body refused to move. Her feet felt glued to the ground, her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't tear her eyes away from him. The villain was the source of all this destruction, the man who had torn the city apart, leaving nothing but carnage in his wake. The villain's eyes locked onto her. For a brief moment, the entire world seemed to freeze. The weight of his gaze pinned her in place, suffocating all else. Himari's breath caught in her throat, her pulse thundering in her ears like a war drum. His smile, sharp and dangerous, stretched wider, more predatory. He moved slowly, deliberately, as though savoring every second. Each step he took toward her felt like the ground itself was trembling under his presence, like the earth was bowing to the overwhelming force of his power. Well, what do we have here? His voice was low, rasping with malice, a growl that seemed to resonate in her very bones. He took another step, and the air around them seemed to grow thick, suffocating. A little light in the middle of all this darkness. How quaint. Himari's stomach twisted with a sickening sense of dread. But even as fear coursed through her veins, she held her ground, her back straight and her chin lifted in defiance. She couldn't back down. Not now. What have you done? Her voice came out steady, though a tremor ran beneath the surface. It was as much a question to herself as it was to him. She could already guess the answer. The devastation around them, the broken city, the ruined heroes, it was all his doing. The villain chuckled, the sound a low rumble that seemed to crawl under her skin. What have I done? Open your eyes, kid, he mocked, throwing his arms wide, gesturing to the destruction around them. The answer's right in front of you. Himari's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She reached deep within herself, digging into the core of her strength. The familiar spark of energy lit up her palms, the first flickers of light swirling into existence. She held it tight, forcing it into a barrier that materialized in front of her, its radiance casting an eerie glow in the smoke-filled air. The villain's grin widened, amusement dancing in his eyes. You think this little trick will stop me? He taunted. His massive fist clenched, muscles rippling beneath his skin like a storm in an instant. He lunged forward with terrifying speed. It was like a predator closing in on its prey, the distance between them vanishing in the blink of an eye. His arm whipped down with such force that the air itself seemed to bend around the blow. The sheer impact of the punch was like a thunderclap. Himari barely had time to react as the shockwave from his attack slammed into her shield. The force rattled her bones, sending a reverberation through her entire body, and the world spun as though she were caught in the center of a storm. The light from her barrier flickered under the pressure, wavering as if it might shatter any second. I won't let you, she gasped, her voice strained but resolute. She pressed her hands together, attempting to call on more power. The light around her flickered as the villain raised his fist again, his shadow falling over her like a looming storm cloud. Suddenly, a familiar, urgent voice cut through the air. Run. It was weak, but full of desperation. Himari's heart skipped in her chest as her eyes snapped toward the source. Splash's face was ghostly pale, her breaths ragged and shallow. Every inhale a struggle as if each breath could be her last. Blood trickled from the corners of her mouth, staining her lips red, but the fire in her gaze remained unwavering. Her body trembled, clearly struggling to stay awake, and her eyes locked with Himari's. Run, she rasped, her voice barely more than a whisper, but heavy with the weight of warning. Himari's breath caught. Her heroes, her mentors, her friends were telling her to run. The weight of their words pressed heavily on her heart. But she couldn't. Not like this, no. She shouted, her voice trembling with raw emotion. I'm not leaving you. Without another thought, she surged forward, the light in her hands flaring brighter than before. She wouldn't run. Not now. Not when they needed her. She unleashed a barrage of light beams, each one a sharp, radiant arrow cutting through the air. The beams sped toward the villain with laser precision. Some struck him, causing him to stagger back, but his smirk never wavered. He barely seemed to register the pain, as if her attacks were little more than an annoying itch to him. Not bad, he said, voice thick with mockery, barely even panting. But not good enough. The villain didn't waste a moment. Before Himari could gather her strength for another strike, he lunged forward, his fists moving with frightening speed. She barely managed to raise a second shield in time, the light flaring around her in an attempt to block the devastating blow. The impact was enough to crack her barrier, sending vibrations through her entire body. She felt the shock travel all the way to her bones, nearly making her drop to the ground. But before she could regain her balance, the villain was already on her again. His fists came like thunder, each one faster and more powerful than the last. She tried to block, tried to retaliate, but each attempt only seemed to make him more relentless. He was toying with her. The pain was unbearable. Every blow knocked the breath out of her. Her body screamed, her strength fading, the light in her hands flickering with each impact. She was running out of time. Then came the final strike, a massive, devastating punch that landed directly on her ribs. The force sent her crashing to the ground, the wind knocked out of her. She could barely move, her vision blurry, the edges of her world darkening. I can't. Give up. Her mind screamed, but her body refused to cooperate. She barely managed to raise her trembling hand, the last of her energy gathering in a thin, fading beam of light. She tried to aim it at the villain, but the light sputtered and dimmed before it even left her palm. His laugh was cruel and booming, echoing through the broken city. Done already? His voice oozed with disdain as he loomed over her, his massive form casting a long, menacing shadow over her battered body. You were fun for a minute, but you're just another dead hero now. Himari grit her teeth, her body screaming for her to stop, but she wouldn't. Not yet. Not yet. Her voice was barely a whisper as she forced herself to her knees, gathering the last of her strength. Her hands trembled, but the light that burst forth was still there, fragile, thin, but shining with everything she had left. The villain sneered, unimpressed, swatting the faint flicker of light aside as though it were a pesky fly. His laugh, low, cruel, victorious, rang out, the sound cutting through the suffocating air like a blade. Her body betrayed her, the weight of exhaustion bearing down on her like a collapsing building. Her arms gave out beneath her, and she crumpled to the ground, her vision swimming in and out of focus. The world around her twisted and blurred, colors bleeding together into a chaotic swirl of reds, blacks, and grays. The acrid stench of blood and smoke filled her lungs, choking her with each shallow breath. Her entire body felt heavy, unresponsive, and every attempt to move was like trying to swim through quicksand. The villain's laugh continued, deep and mocking, but it sounded farther away now, like it belonged to a different world. Himari tried to focus, to hold on, but the darkness pressed in from all sides, dragging her deeper and deeper into its clutches. And then, through the haze, she saw it. A shadow. Someone was there. Her heart lurched painfully in her chest as she struggled to make sense of the figure moving toward her through the thick smoke. Each step they took seemed deliberate, purposeful, cutting through the chaos with an unsettling calm, as though the destruction around them was nothing more than a distant echo. Aizuku. The name slipped from her lips in a cracked whisper, barely audible, swallowed by the heavy air. She wanted to scream, to warn him, to beg him to turn around and run, but her throat closed tight. Her voice wouldn't rise above a broken breath. Panic clawed at her, and her mind began to fray, her thoughts unraveling one by one as the world around her seemed to tilt. The last thing she saw before the edges of darkness began to consume her was the figure stepping forward, standing unwavering in the middle of the wreckage. And then, everything went black. So, this was the end of part 2 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.